Welcome to Season 4 of Outstanding Women Leaders, Witty and Wise Conversations. I'm your host, Katie L. Leeds, founder and chief owl at Outstanding Women Leaders, Owl Professional Coaching and Podcast, an organization dedicated to empowering women leaders in leadership, relationships, and life. Owl is on a mission to host 100 million witty and wise conversations that inspire you, change the way you think, and stir your soul into action. This inspiration today begins with a set of rules to guide our conversations. Rule number 1, nobody gets to be wrong. Rule number 2, nobody gets to be right. Rule number 3, everybody gets to be vulnerable. And rule number 4, everything is included. If your child walks in, the phone rings, it's in the podcast. We do not edit here. This conversation is exactly what it needs to be in this moment in time. We've asked our guests to join us via video to allow us to create authentic connection. Eyes are the window to the soul. You will be seen here. You will be heard. There is space for you. When this conversation comes to a close, I will ask our guest 3 questions. You've tuned in before, you know what they are. If you haven't, you don't want to miss them, but enough about me. Today, I'm excited to welcome Outstanding Women Leader, Jen Borovy. Jen is a coach, mentor, and speaker who provides training and support around the topics of secondary traumatic stress, healthy, sustainable life rhythms, empathy with boundaries, and trauma-informed care. Prior to launching and founding 1010 Coaching, she worked for 11 years for Knox County Schools, where she was first a classroom teacher and then an instructional behavior coach. All 11 of those years were spent supporting, advocating, and loving the families in the most underserved communities of Knoxville. Once resigning from public education, 1010 Coaching was formed with the intention of supporting individuals who are caring for others with trauma, such as medical professionals, educators, social workers, the nonprofit sector, first responders, and beyond. In Jen's personal life, she spends time with her husband of 13 years and her 3 sons, who are 9, 8, and 5. Ooh. She also spends a large portion of her time serving and volunteering with organizations who partner with foster families and kids on removal day, advocating for and walking with those from marginalized spaces, reading and squeezing in any time she can, exploring new places. Welcome. Thank you
so
Jen.
much.
Yes, 1010 Coaching. Let's just start with your name. Tell me a little bit about how you got to 1010.
All right. So that name trips everybody up all the time, especially when they see that it's the word 10 and the number 10. But 1010 Coaching is faith-based. We don't push the faith sector whenever we're meeting and doing things and coaching people. But for me personally, it's faith-based. And so just through the journey that I've gone on through the last, 3 or 4 years, and just my own personal healing and all of the things. 1010 Coaching is based out of John 10:10, which is the scripture talking about, how God wants us all to live an abundant life. And so 1010 Coaching is just helping people, like you heard in the bio in the introduction, of just figuring out what it means to stay in the roles that they have, serving people who bring hard things to the table, but also still being healthy and living an abundant, healthy life.
So usually people that get into supporting those that are in traumatic scenarios in life have their own traumatic experiences. So take us back. You don't have to go way back to in womb for a traumatic experience if you don't want, but how do you get to 1010?
So I have, I could say 3 decades, so I'm 35 right now. And I have probably a solid 30 plus years of traumatic experiences. I had a crazy traumatic childhood. For anybody who knows anything about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, there is a old traditional normal, I don't know how you want to explain it, but there's a solid 10 that they use as an example, kind of as a foundation of ACEs. And I was a kiddo who had all 10. And I didn't know that growing up. Obviously, no child does. No child realizes that they're experiencing all of these things. I just thought it was normal life, and so obviously that definitely formed the kind of person that I am, and how I was raised and kind of the choices that I made and what I wanted to do with my life. I was the first person in my family to go to college, but that was an adventure all in itself, so I graduated high school. My parents divorced for the second time. My mom moved away and moved in with my stepdad. My brother was traveling for his job. I started dating my boyfriend at the time. Just all kinds of different things were happening. I was 18 and I thought it was great. Like what 18-year-old girl wouldn't want to be doing their own thing whenever they wanted, and so the guy that I was dating at the time, who's now actually my husband, he was very driven and had very specific goals and a vision for his life. And I was just kind of along for the ride, and he very much said, I'm going to go here and go to school. If you want to do like this relationship, you have to come. And if you don't, I won't do long distance. And so I was like, well, here we go. So I went to school.
Girls do a lot of crazy things for relationships, but enrolling in college is one of those. It's not so bad. As crazy as it may have been. Now becoming a teacher in college, now that might have been crazy.
That was where that was the beginning of the end for a long, long time. Right. And so like crazy childhood, lots of trauma, decided to go to college, which was like hands down the best decision I've ever made, as far as that time of my life and deciding what I was going to do. And, I can look back at that time and see clearly how that was kind of like a fork in the road moment, because if I wouldn't have gone to school, like who really knows what would have happened? I was living in this house with my brother's friends. They were not making wise choices, and I was working at Target. So like who really knows? So that was a good fork in the road moment, and then over the course of, I guess you could say, my 20s, lots of other things were happening. My biological dad is just, he loves hard, but he just has his own issues, and I was struggling with that relationship and wasn't sure where the boundary was, and, wanted to be a daughter, but like knew he wasn't healthy and it wasn't safe. And so just trying to navigate all of that. And then 30s hit, and through all this time, I was a teacher, I was having kids, I was married, everything was fine, what I thought was fine, and which I feel like is typically how this goes for people when they don't realize that they're carrying all this trauma. At some point it comes to light. There's something that happens that kind of brings it all to the surface where you're like, wait, something is wrong. What is it? And for me, that was when I stepped foot into the last half of my public education career. So I was working in a middle school. It would classify as inner city here in Knoxville, super urban, not a lot of white faces unless you're a teacher in the room. And that's all I'd ever known. And so, but it was that particular stretch of time where my own personal trauma was coming to surface, but I didn't know it's what that was. And it was because of all this secondary trauma I was experiencing from teaching my kiddos and doing life with them without boundaries, which is a huge piece for me and kind of my journey of how I got to 1010. Like I knew that I was a great teacher, but I knew that I was also exhausted because I was a great teacher and I was a great mom, and I was doing everything I could to not drop those balls, and kind of keep them all in the air at the same time. But the ball that I was dropping was the one for myself.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't taking care of myself. Like that was the last priority, 110%. And so all of that was happening. And then there was lots of things happening with my kids that I was teaching, my kids at home. It was just crazy. My mental health was like sliding very quickly towards rock bottom, and yeah.
So you hit rock bottom.
Yes, 100%.
I always am curious, like what rock bottom looks like for every individual, because they are different. Like my rock bottom when I taught on the South Side was we had an in-service and I just didn't go.
Yeah.
And it was like 10 a.m. before I even sent an email. No one emailed me, by the way. So that's just a fun noticing.
Like that's a different conversation, but yeah.
People usually recognize when I'm not in the room. But that was my rock bottom, was I couldn't get out of bed. And I didn't know what was wrong with me because I've never been irresponsible in my life. So what did rock bottom look like for you? Like, how do you recognize I'm rock bottom?
Yeah. And I think, honestly, I think I was at rock bottom for a lot longer than I probably realized, people around me also weren't realizing that I was at rock bottom because I was still performing, and so I was voted teacher of the year, right before the pandemic hit. And what the staff didn't know is that before that announcement was made, I was already trying to find a way out and trying to make changes and trying to do something different because it wasn't working, you know. And then when that happened and that announcement came, I didn't go to, I think it was our Christmas party, I guess, that year. I didn't go to the Christmas party because I knew they were going to make the announcement of who was teacher of the year, and I knew it was me. I didn't go. I faked being sick and went home. And I was like, I'm going to be rewarded for killing myself, basically. And I was like, but no one knows that. And how could they? Because I don't show it, you know? It was like, I think that was the beginning of the end for me, was when I was given a trophy for overdoing it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so then the pandemic hit, school closed, which was a gift, for me anyways, personally. I had 3 kids that were home with me because school closed, you know, and so during that particular season, March of 2020 to July of 2020, you know, it was me and my husband, my best friend, who's more like my sister, and my 3 kids who were 6, 4, and 2. And we were spending all of our time outside. We were doing all the hiking, all of the things, and just trying to figure out like how we were going to go back into the insanity after we had just spent all these intentional months taking care of ourselves. And so that was a journey, and it was a mess trying to go back to school that fall of 2020. And in October of 2020, when my husband got COVID and we were at home for 14 days, that's when anxiety started for me for the first time. And that's when the panic attack started for the first time. And then I had to go back to teaching after that. I had 3 virtual classes and an in-person class. And for about 2 weeks straight, there wasn't a day when I was at the school where I wasn't crying somewhere. But still, no one knew it besides my best friend, who also happened to work there. So like she knew, and my husband knew, but no one else knew. And that went on for about 2 months. And that's when I started counseling. I was like, something is wrong. I don't know what this is. And then January of 2021, kind of tracking here, I switched roles. I left the classroom and I went into a part-time coaching role,
Yeah,
which you kind of mentioned in my introduction.
a lot of teachers feel like that will be a shift for them. If I can get out of the classroom, if I can get out of the bogged down work of the grading and the IEP meetings and the testing,
Right.
and you're still in the same container.
Yep. And so that was really the big shift, kind of that, you know, January 2020 to December of 2020. So it was a year-long kind of process for me because I really, really, really didn't want to leave. I really didn't. It's all I'd ever known, and I loved it. But I knew a change needed to happen. So I tried the part-time thing, like to create some space, see what I can do, create some space, you know, and then spring of 2021 happened. That's when we lost 6 of our students to gun violence in the same community. And I'm thankful I was part-time. I see how that was a gift in my favor as well. I don't think I would have made it through being a full-time teacher during that semester. I don't know how my friends did it and how my colleagues did it. I was only there part-time, and it was hard, and they were there every single day.
Yeah, we
all day long.
we never know how people do it. We just know the why they do it.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is why you don't tell anybody. My advantage to not having middle school and having high school students, juniors in particular, is I shared my lived experience with them, not from a place of overshare, but hey, today's a tough day.
Oh yeah, 100%.
My fiance
Same.
went through kidney failure and went through a transplant. I taught night school. I taught the whole during the day. I led the teachers. You know, something has to give. And I found that my why of the students and being able to have them connected to what was happening for me, as you know, like the students are never the problem.
Sure. And for me, you know, a lot of the why behind it, and I told my students, I mean, I was very open with them too. They knew things, you know, and they knew things about my childhood and kind of why I was where I was. And, you know, the why for me was always, you know, like the reason why I made it to where I am today when I was in front of them was because I had these adults around me, you know, and I had an adult here this year, or a couple of years later, there was this adult, or there was this adult. And, you know, like, not that the adult saved my life, but they played such an important role on how I ended up where I am now. like it could have been so different. It should have been so different. And so I would tell them those things, and that was kind of my why. But as you can hear, from what I've been saying, it was a slippery slope because there were no boundaries either. And I wasn't dealing with my own unprocessed and unhealed traumas, and so that spring semester occurred fall of 2022. When right before school started that fall, my therapist and my doctor were like, Jen, listen, you have crazy anxiety. You have severe depression. I had 0 serotonin. You have PTSD. Like, this is a whole situation, but we can't tell you to not go to work. And so we started the school year, fall of 2022. Like, I can figure this out. And there was just no way, because the same stuff was happening, like panic attacks, just trying to avoid people, but still do my job. It wasn't working.
Did you try the Lexapro to go to work? Because I did that. I was back in a school doing fundraising, and instead of, I would cry in the bathroom. My bullies were adults. They always are. Did you try any? Did you get the magic 5 milligrams of Lexapro that just made it slightly easier?
Well, no, so I didn't do Lexapro. I did Celexa.
Okay. You mentioned that you had 0 serotonin as well. And I'm always curious, like, how did they know that you have 0 serotonin? Did they check your serotonin levels?
Yep.
Because I've never ever been able to have anyone that's put in an order to check my levels of dopamine or anything like that. So.
Yep. Because the doctor was like, well, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, I'm crying every day. He's like,
your gut is like screaming out like, hey, this is not okay. 90% of our serotonin is created in our gut.
Yeah. So long story short, I went on a leave of absence February of 2022. Yeah. My years are all messed up. Obviously COVID years, like what is time? But yeah, went on leave of absence February of 2022. Didn't want to resign. I was still trying to hang on. It was like maybe a long extended break will work, and it wasn't until May, like 3 months later, where the fog kind of started to clear, and I met with my therapist every week for, at that point, 8 or 9 months, and realized that I couldn't go back. And I knew I wasn't supposed to go back, but I was still going to try, and ultimately realized that wasn't the best decision, and started to actually, figure out who I am without all of that. And how to be healthy and all of the things, and heal all of that, and learn about boundaries and put them in place. And so I resigned and started the business in July of 2022.
So I always get curious about, you hit this rock bottom, you realize like you're fighting as much as you can to go back. What advice would you give that teacher that has just made that decision to take some time off, knowing they want to go back? Is this like the death sentence as soon as you take your medical leave that you're never coming back? Or is there a way to allow yourself to go back effectively?
I think there's definitely a way to go back effectively. But I don't think you need to figure out what that looks like for you on your own. I don't think that's wise. And I think I would encourage whoever that person is to be mindful of who they're surrounding themselves with, and kind of who has a hold of their ear. It's very important who you're listening to during that time. I think you definitely need to be talking to a trained professional, whatever that looks like for you. Somebody who's kind of impartial and doesn't have an opinion about your life.
Which trained professionals typically do, but that's my own personal.
Just I don't know, somebody who doesn't, I don't know. But yeah, I think there's a way to go back effectively. I think it's going to take a lot of work. And I think maybe there might be a season where you step away from the building where you were that caused you to want to go on leave anyway, and try to figure out how to be a teacher differently in a different space before you decide to go back into the place that caused you to want to leave in the first place.
Yeah. I have the gift of farsightedness because I didn't I didn't have the rock bottom for me. Like, I went after that happened, I went in and said my father-in-law had passed away. I think that's probably why I was like, I just want to be with my family. And my family was living in a different part of the state, like 5 hours away. Yeah. So for me, leaving education wasn't, I hit rock bottom in education so much as it was, so my third and final school. Third times is always a charm for me. So you've got John, I've got Peter, or Paul. Which one was that?
Yep.
And I stayed 1 year. So I was 3 years north side, 3 years south side, 1 year, but I had also opened a CrossFit gym. And the reason I did that, for me, what prevented rock bottom until it like kind of kicked the can down the road, rock bottom ended up being when I sold my business and got divorced, was I started going to CrossFit after work. And I was a college athlete, but like, I didn't want to go to the gym. I freaking hate the gym. The gym is dumb to me. Right.
Yeah.
But I did want friends that weren't teachers. And instead of hanging out Friday night at Cork and Carry to have our beer, I was going to meet these new friends at the gym to do a workout I didn't really want to do, but I wanted to see the friends. And the people that I became friends with, you talk about those 5 people that have your ear, those weren't teachers. And I found that if I came home after the gym, we just made dinner and like did things. I didn't talk about work.
Right.
I didn't even think about work because I moved my body and I sweated things out. And we had, CrossFit, you do a little lifting so you can chit chat. This is why I liked CrossFit. It was really a social hour. I get to work. Like that's what, sports are for girls in high school and college.
Oh,
like
sure.
we have our, right. And that shifted everything for me. I stopped going on a bad day to McDonald's and getting the large Coke and the biggie fry and going home. I did that one time. I went to the CrossFit gym and I was like, never again. Marcel had drop kicked a chair that day in my class. And I was like, I kind of earned some fries. But I found that made such a difference. And opening the gym for me, I'm still educating. I got to work with high school players again in high school. I love high school kids because they are adults without the baggage.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that.
And the boundaries, though, I just have this is my superpower. I have a gift of making kids feel like they have all the autonomy in the world. And yet somehow they also know that they're not in charge. It's a magical gift. And teachers that have it do not have discipline issues in their classroom. And teachers that do not need instructional coaching on it. I really firmly believe that coaching is personal development. And when you develop yourself personally, you can thrive professionally. And we don't develop
100%.
teachers. We don't develop them at all personally. Could you imagine a world where you said, okay, you're 23, you just graduated college. I'm going to make you 23 in this scenario. Here's the keys to the company. You have 150 employees that you're managing, and we need you to leverage their talent so that it shows up on these tests. Because that's really what corporate is, right? You're leveraging talent to create the things, right? You would never do that.
No, not at all.
I get to coach in corporate. I have a 23-year-old that this company has invested in her for coaching, and getting to coach her on giving feedback. Her boss, she can't model her boss. Her boss is all about comparison. The interns aren't like you. You need to get them to being able to coach her. She's like, wow, this is a lot better than how I was going to show up to my feedback meetings before. I'm like, yeah, you're darn right it is. Because that's how you give feedback to children. And so I love that you 1010 coaching, you are here now to support people. Tell us all about your business and how you are pouring into people personally versus this instructional coach BS, which behavioral coach, we can't instruct behavior. We can inspire it. You can do a carrot and stick, but guess what? Those ADHD brains, those are people that just like chocolate. We don't want your stupid carrot. Sorry. I'm off my soapbox.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It was that was such a hard line to walk because it's what you said. I could walk into a room and before I even got to the room, I already knew. You know what I mean? I already knew. I'm very intuitive, very empathetic. I can read a room, I can read feelings, kind of like we've talked about before. I knew before I got there what the actual helpful thing was going to be for this person, regardless of what happened in the space. You know what I mean? But it was a school system and there was red tape and there was only so much I could do and say, which was why some people didn't experience success and they were frustrated, which is a different conversation. But anyway, so 1010 coaching, which is why we are here. What I do is I partner with anybody who cares for other people who are going through a hard time, basically is what this is. And so currently right now I'm working with a nonprofit who loves on kids on removal day while they're waiting for foster placement. And so what that looks like is I'm actually there for the volunteers, not for the staff. And so this specific nonprofit provides counseling for their staff, provides and requires actually counseling for their staff, but they don't have anything in place for their volunteers. But this nonprofit wouldn't function without the volunteers. And so I go in right now once a month to one particular location, and I spend time facilitating conversations with volunteers about what they're experiencing. At the very beginning, we did a secondary trauma workshop and talked about what secondary trauma is and what it's not, and how it impacts them and what it might look like in their daily life, and things they can put in place and strategies they can use to kind of combat that and cope with that in a healthy way and stay a volunteer. So that's one thing. And then I do some stuff with some individuals. A few individuals that I'm working with right now are just going through some major season shifts in life. And so I'm coaching them through that and what that looks like. It's very heavy with boundaries. It's a lot of identity and, self-worth work and things like that. And just some speaking engagements that are coming down the pike, talking about mental health and faith and, how to serve people who have hard things going on and how to stay healthy within ourselves at the same time so we can serve who we want to serve without getting burnout. And some people want to say, oh, you're doing burnout prevention and burnout recovery. I'm like, yeah, it is kind of that. I guess you could use those words. But I'm trying to focus heavily on how to have boundaries with empathy. Because there's a big difference between caring for someone and then carrying someone else's stuff home. And so we talk a lot about that, what it means to care versus carrying someone else's stuff. So.
Could you give our audience a few tips on what it means to care versus carry?
Yeah, and I wish I had this really great visual that we show in some of our workshops and stuff that kind of break that down a little bit, and it's kind of, if you envision yourself sitting with someone at a fence line, and you have one person on one side of the fence and one person on the other side of the fence, and you're sitting with them and you're listening, that's a good version of caring and having empathy with boundaries. That fence kind of keeps you separate, but you're still there to listen and support and to love and to care. But the minute that person opens the fence and you walk through the fence, you're no longer in a place where you can care and support. Now you're in it with them and you're carrying the stuff with them that they were talking to you about. And once you start trying to carry the load, you lose your ability to actually care and support and maintain your own self-identity and self-worth. So you kind of got to keep that boundary, make sure you're not going through the fence, and some analogies that we use with people, they'll tell me something and I'll say, okay, I'm like, are you going through the fence right now? Or are you on your side of the fence? Like, are you caring for them? Or are you trying to carry their stuff home after your time with them is over?
Yeah, what comes up for me as you say that is the word ethics. And this is part of it is because I just took an ICF sort of continuing education on ethics, but ethics for me in that is, if you're trying to carry it, that's not very ethical because you're not holding that other person across from you as resourceful. The minute that we think we need to carry others is the minute that we've looked at them as something less than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that, when you tell someone that reframe, they're like, oh no, I don't think that.
I know. Like, I'm just trying to be helpful.
Like ethics is a big thing in coaching where it's like, oh, this feels like, I don't know if I can be neutral here. I'm like, well, then you're probably trying to solve their problem. Because if we coach for a life well lived, then we're not trying to solve their problem. So we can be neutral because your well-lived life doesn't look like my well-lived life. You are the expert of what well-lived life is. So ethically speaking, if you're walking through the fence, you see them as broken and less than you, and you can't possibly help them. You have to carry them, right? That's why Jesus and the footprints and like he was carrying you, the shepherd, the sheep, there's all the things.
All the things.
All the things. So just in interest of time, because I could talk to you for days, I imagine we will talk again, hopefully. Let's talk a little bit about your amazing superpower.
Oh gosh. So, whenever you asked me that on the survey you sent out, I had to ask other people what they thought my superpower was. Because I just didn't see it that way. Like, I don't know what this is. And then once I got some feedback, I'm like, yeah, okay, that is what it is. So my superpower is I'm not sure how I said it to you, but the way I'll say it now is I have a really innate ability to see and hear what is not being said.
Empathy is that, I think,
Yes.
what if we were to give it
Yes.
bottom line.
Yes. Yeah. Or like, I can read between the lines is another phrase. And I don't know, I'm really great at listening to what someone's struggle is and being able to identify what the struggle actually is, the root cause, not the symptoms, you know, and trying to walk alongside someone when they are ready to kind of uncover some of that stuff. So,
Mm. It's funny you say that because yesterday we were doing stuff for Fem City and I'm like, we were filling out superpowers. I'm like, what's my superpower? I just said it out loud on the phone with the person. She's like, don't you ask that question for a living?
yeah. Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm like, well, I don't want to be boxed in. I only get one.
I know. I'm
We
like,
all
oh,
have
I'm like,
so
I'm
many
a really good mom
superpowers.
too.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
because you listen.
Right. Right.
Because you have empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your purpose?
Oh man. Honestly, right now in this season of life, I really think my purpose is just to guide people through whatever journey that they are on and need to go on to find themselves living life healthy in all of the ways, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever that is, and just helping them figure out why that matters, and that they are a priority.
Yeah, you're a Sherpa.
Yeah.
And last question I love to ask, what's next for you?
I don't know. Someone asked me the other day, they're like, Jen, I can tell by things that are going on that you're really trying to amp up, you're trying to amp up 1010 coaching and you're, doing all the things. And I was like, I don't know if I'm trying to amp up. I was like, I'm just currently in this season of not saying no to opportunities related to the business, and not in an unhealthy lack of boundaries type way. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're a new entrepreneur and a new business owner, I feel like there is a little bit of wisdom in just saying yes to opportunities that come about while you're learning and figuring it out where you want to be and where you don't want to be and what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So currently what's next is I'm just saying yes to stuff to figure out where I'm actually trying to land.
When you say yes to stuff, just add the little caveat of yes to stuff that lights me up or brings me joy.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is great because I'm going to ask you then for what's next. Fem City has, I was just asked to be the president. And I had to be asked 3 times. And then the 3rd time she said my name out loud, like Beetlejuice, I appeared. I was like, okay, I will co-lead this with you, Carol.
Yeah.
So I'll invite you for what's next to join us on March 7th too at Honeybee Cafe in Farragut for a membership drive to meet women.
That sounds awesome. Yep.
Yeah, we would love that. And you were doing some cool things with women entrepreneurs in Knoxville as well.
Yes. Yep.
Exciting. Right. So what's next for you is saying yes to Katie. I love it. Amazing.
Yes. Saying yes to Katie.
People can find you at 10 the number coaching.com, 1010 coaching. And can we follow you on Instagram? Are there places to social media?
I'm on there. Yep. It's 1010 coaching _
1010 coaching _ fabulous. And I always love to leave our guests with the last word because I always usually like to have it. So last word that you want to leave our guests with, anything, nugget of wisdom, what have you?
Oh yeah. Listen, this is my favorite. The thing that I say to everybody, I'm like, you are not replaceable at home, whatever home looks like to you. Everybody has family, everybody has friends. And so, you're not replaceable when it comes to your relationships with them. So do what you got to do to make sure that you are showing up for yourself and for the people that love you. Because you're replaceable in your professional life.